I'm one of those that loves to go down the conspiracy rabbit holes. Like, I love them all. That's what helped me get into this space in 2020, because I started to put together the puzzle pieces of like, something ain't right. And it ain't got nothing to do with the politics and all of that. It's got way more to do with the spiritual world. So, Josh, what I kind of want to do is start with CERN. So let's get into maybe like the basics and the mysteries. Can you give us like a quick history of CERN, like what it is, what are they doing there, and what are they trying to accomplish with the experiments that they're doing up there?
Yeah, and so this is interesting. So there's two different ways to answer it. It's like what their official position is, and then what really might be going on. So their official position. Well, just to basically start. So CERN is the organized, that's the body of people that decide what to do with the machine, the LHC, which is the Large Hadron Collider. It's basically a big particle collider. So CERN is not the machine itself. A lot of people get that mixed up. It's basically like NASA and rockets. So NASA decides what to do with the rockets. NASA is the body of people that decide that. CERN is the body of people that decide what to do with the particle accelerator. And their main position is they're just trying to, their official statement, they're trying to find out basically what makes the universe tick. Like, what is the universe made of? How does reality work? How does physical reality work? And they do that by looking at basically just the building blocks of reality through these particle collisions. So that's basically their stated thing. But then there's other weird kind of things, though, that they've said, too. So they've talked about opening portals. They've talked about creating miniature black holes. They talked about a lot of these things. And basically what I came away from it, because I know a couple of scientists that work at CERN, too. I mean, there's Christians that work there, And I think what it is that like 99% of like the scientists and people that are working there, they're not doing it for any occult or pagan or any kind of weird reasons. They're really just curious about the universe. That's like most of them. But I do think that there's this, I don't know if you'd call it like a shadow group. I don't know what you'd call it, but I do think that there are just certain individuals there that kind of do have more of what we would consider a dark spiritual kind of worldview around this stuff. Because
do you think they're the main folks that are running it at the top? Kind of like what we see in our current world with the globalism and all of that. You've got the puppeteers up here that run everything. Do you think it's like that and they pass the agendas down?
It could be. Yeah, it might be. Or it might just be totally random. Because because the thing about CERN is it's like multi-nation. So there's a lot of nations involved in it. It's almost like a mini UN. Okay. And so you're going to have people from all sorts of different backgrounds. But I do think when you have people who are interested, because the way they frame it with scientific terms, but when you really look at what they're saying, it's like, okay. So for example, they'll say that what they want to do with the LHC, one of the top things is to discover extra dimensions. First prove that they exist.
Yep.
And then actually probe extra dimensions and map them out. But then it goes further. They also have said, and this has been even in popular science documentaries like hosted by Brian Greene and stuff like that. So this is not a secret. They also have developed an idea on how to see if there's intelligent, conscious life in these extra dimensions. And they've developed a way. They haven't built it yet, but they've developed like a way to like have communication. So the basic idea is to use gravitons, but gravitons have not technically been discovered yet, but they're working on it, and they probably will be at some point. But the weird thing about gravitons is all of the math says that gravitons have the ability to naturally cross over into extra dimensions if extra dimensions exist, and they do.
Okay.
The extra dimensions actually have to exist because time and space can be bent, and we know that's been proven, like time dilation, stuff like that. If you're near like Interstellar, the movie, if you're near a black hole, time runs totally differently than if you're away from it. Well, that's because time and space, they're woven together and they can bend. Well, if they can bend, there must be something for it to bend into. So it's like if I have a piece of paper here, if there was no third dimension, if we didn't have up or down, this would be totally flat and it would be impossible to bend it because there would be no extra third dimension to bend it into. But because I can bend it means that there's a third dimension, there's an up and down. So for our space and time to be bent the way that it is, it must bend into something. So there is at least one extra dimension. There's probably a lot more than that, but there's at least one. So the idea is to discover gravitons and learn how to manipulate them, which once they can isolate a particle, they can manipulate it any way they want. They already know how to do that. And then affect the spin and create a binary code. So you could have a string of gravitons, one up spin, one down spin, whatever. And to create like a binary, almost like a Morse code, string those together and then just send them into an extra dimension, then set up a detector and see if there's a reply. That's one idea and they've been talking about this for well over a decade.
Okay.
So
do you watch, have you seen Stranger Things? Are you a fan?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So is it because to help the layman, right? The person that struggled in these types of science classes that are a lot harder, even though my husband was in the same ones, never studied and showed up and got A's, but whatever. I'm not mad about it still. But anyway, is it safe for the layman to think about kind of like if you've watched Stranger Things to see them blasting that machine through and then they open this dimension and you've got the upside down? Is it kind of that? Is that how we can think of it as a layman if we don't understand all of these scientific terms?
Yeah, that would be more of a physical portal. This graviton thing, you wouldn't need a portal to do it because the gravitons can already they're already doing this on their own anyway.
Okay.
So that would be if you wanted to physically bring something here, or physically, like if we wanted to transport like a person to an extra dimension, it would be something similar. That's a good way of putting it. It's something similar to that, like in Stranger Things. But when I think about, the science director has even said, Sergio Bertolucci of CERN, he's even said, when we do this, if we open portals or whatever, some unknowns might come through, whatever that means. So every once in a while, you'll get these higher ups at CERN that say these like weird things like that. And it's like, well, what is that? Now, the weird thing about this gravitational communication system thing, the way I look at it, isn't that just a modern day technological way of praying to and venerating ancient false gods? Because if you think about it, we know that there's more beyond the physical world. We as Christians know that. We know there's heaven, there's hell, there's angels, there's demons, there's God. We know all of these things. So the scientists may not know that, but the only thing that they're going to be communicating with are fallen angels and demons. God's not going to answer that. A good angel, an obedient angel, isn't going to answer that.
No, it's kind of like they're playing with a Ouija board almost. Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like they're sending messages. And what is prayer? But you're sending messages. You're trying to communicate with something bigger than yourself. That's essentially what prayer is. So they're doing the same thing, but they're taking this technological route to get there. And so that's concerning. Now, the good thing is that they don't have the technology to be able to do that yet because gravitons haven't been discovered. And then somebody might be saying, but Josh, maybe they have discovered it and they haven't told us. Impossible. Because man's ego and pride will not stand for that, because whoever is the first one to actually discover a graviton, instant Nobel Prize and a ton of money, ton of funding. I mean, it's too much fame to turn down. I don't see any human being doing that.
That makes sense. And it would be their life's work. They would want that. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Sold me on that. That's fine.
Yeah. It would be the biggest discovery. It would be, remember in 2012, some people might remember this. They discovered the Higgs boson particle. And they've been looking for that since like the 60s. And that was huge news in 2012. Well, the graviton would be even bigger than that. This would be like the greatest discovery in all of quantum physics. So I don't think that any physicist or anybody involved in that kind of work is going to say, well, no, let's keep it a secret from the public so we can talk to these things. They would just do it publicly. They've already been talking about it. They put stuff like that on their website. They're really open about what they want to do. They don't use terms like angels or demons like we would, but they'll say like unknown unknowns, or they'll say extra dimensional intelligences. They'll say stuff like that. So the vast majority, again, of people that work at CERN just think, okay, this is just exploration. It's like if we were exploring space and wanted to see if there's life on another planet or something. They look at it as like no different than that. We as Christians see a difference because it's like, okay, another planet, that's still in our physical universe. This is something outside of our physical universe that the Bible expressly forbids us to interact with for good reason, because there are things there that want to kill you. There are things there that want to destroy you and deceive you, and not even kill you physically, but kill you spiritually. Deceive you to where you can't. You're following these things instead of Jesus. So when you die, you're not saved and you're eternally damned. That's their goal.
It almost feels like it's even like New Age on steroids, almost too.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
It's like a technological New Age, and a lot of physicists, not all of them, but a lot of physicists do have this New Age kind of bent. And you know this too, like anybody who's ever even interacted at all with New Age, they love quantum physics, New Age, because they like taking it and twisting it and turning it into meaning other things. Like New Age loves quantum physics the way that they love Christianity. And what I mean by that is they love taking the words and twisting it to mean something totally different. So you'll see, like in New Age, there's a famous experiment called the double slit experiment. And basically all it does is it just shows that particles behave differently in different conditions. The way that it's usually framed is if you're observing a particle, it behaves as a particle. But if you're not observing it, if nobody's looking at it, if there's no detector, then it behaves as a wave. So what New Age will do, and there is a scientific reason for that makes a lot of sense that I can explain. But what New Age will do is they'll take that and they'll stop it right there. They won't actually figure out why that's happening, and they'll say, see, we create our own reality. What you expect is what you're gonna manifest into your life. And they get into all this weird New Agey stuff, and that's not what's happening at all. We're human beings who have eyes that need photons. We need light to be able to see anything. So when you're trying to observe a particle, even in a detector, you need light. You're adding all these particles, all these light particles. You're destroying your own experiment. That's why it behaves that way. If the particle is not being observed, then there's no photons that's interacting with the wave. So the wave just behaves normally as it would. But if you're looking at it, all of a sudden you're adding all of these photons. It's basically like showering, like raining all these other particles onto this one particle. It's going to mess it up. And that's why the wave, they call it the collapse of the wave function. But basically it's that the particle just is a particle now because you're destroying it with these bullets of photons. So it makes perfect sense why that would happen. But, New Age doesn't care. Just like New Age doesn't care about the truth of Christianity, but they love our terminology. They love, using our words against us and using it to try to deceive Christians like myself, years and years and years ago into thinking like, yeah, you can marry New Age and Christianity. They go along perfectly. They try to do that with science. So there are some physicists that have kind of a New Age bent to them, and they'll interpret things like that. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough where you see them in documentaries and stuff. So yeah, that's a great point that comes up quite a bit.
Okay. So CERN has been associated obviously with some super strange and dark imagery. And I know that anybody here who's gone down the CERN rabbit hole, they've seen like the statue of Shiva. They're seeing the references to Apollyon and Abaddon. So I think you're kind of hinting at some of that, but is there any truth to the idea that this imagery does reveal that there might be a deeper and perhaps even sinister purpose for CERN?
Yeah, I think so. And whether or not the people themselves know what they're doing, again, I think most of them don't, but probably a few do. I think they're at least being influenced, because the strange thing is when CERN was first built, when they were first putting CERN together and building the LHC, they picked a really inconvenient place to actually build it. It's on the border of France and Switzerland for some reason, and they had to build it underground, and it was a weird place to pick. But while they were digging, and who knows why they did this again, and this might have been a demonic influence. But while they were digging to the hole to put the machine in, they actually had to stop construction because they discovered the ruins of an ancient Roman city called Apollyacum, and that ancient Roman commune or whatever it was, they venerated Apollo, basically, and the original Roman inhabitants there believed that that's where the bottomless pit was, which is totally weird. It's like, what are the chances of that? Now, I don't think that people even knew that was there. So to me, it's like, why did they pick that place? Was that a demonic influence that they might not have even known why they picked it, but they just did because they were being influenced? Or did somebody know something? I don't know, but that's a weird coincidence because Apollo, that connects with Apollyon / Abaddon from Revelation 9, where the bottomless pit opens. And then, yeah, you bring up that they've got this statue out in front of Shiva, which is it's a part of like the Hindu Trinity, and the depiction, it looks like Satan coming through a portal of flames, but
Yeah,
like,
it does.
yeah, really, what's being depicted there, it's the Nataraja dance of Shiva, where Shiva destroys the universe so Brahma can like recreate it again or something. And so it's like, what an odd thing to put in front of like the CERN that has this hadron collider thing that people are worried is going to open black holes and destroy the world and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
That just doesn't seem like coincidence to me. Like I just can't, you know what I mean? Like I can't get on board with like, well, that's just, you know, like that just is too, it's too on the nose.
yeah, same here. So it's like even if I gave everybody there the benefit of the doubt, and even if nobody there knows what's going on, it seems like there's at least some demonic influence
Yes.
leading them towards certain things. Because you
Exactly.
certainly don't see any Christian imagery. You know, it's not that. It's all this like Indian like universe destroying kind of stuff.
Right.
So of course that leads people to think. So the history there with Polyacum and Apollo and the bottomless pit, and then even the imagery that they're showing today with the Shiva statue and it looks like a portal. So that does make people think like, wow, what is going on here? This seems satanic.
Wow. Okay. So we know that they are, it's in some form or fashion trying to access other dimensions, right?
Yes.
And obviously
And
not
they're open
everybody
about
there.
that.
Right. They are. So I think you've kind of already answered the question, but more of your opinion based on your research and what you know. Do you think there is a nefarious purpose, or do you think that it is just like, it probably is just what you just said? If it's not nefarious where some people know about it, they are being influenced demonically because they're not saved. They don't have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. So they're not even getting a check in their spirit that some of this stuff is even like going to a doorway that they really don't want to open. So in other words, do you think it's nefarious in the sense that it is or it isn't, or it just might be because of the influence?
I think it is. Some of it is nefarious, whether the people know it there or not, because there are people there that are very excited about this idea of contacting extra dimensional intelligences. That's how they, we would say that's spirit. Like when I say extra dimensional, to me just means spiritual. Like everything that physics says about extra dimensions, and that's actually, and I don't mean just interpretations of what people say, but like the actual science-based fact of how extra dimensions would work and how it would operate with the idea that we have this three-dimensional physical universe. It matches up perfectly with what the Bible describes as well, except that they're just not going to use words like spiritual or heaven or hell. They're going to use other words. But I think that they do have this drive that they want. They clearly don't want like the God of the Bible. I mean, like I said, there are a few Christians that do work there. And so I'm not throwing them in this camp, but there's plenty of people, there's plenty of physicists, scientists that just absolutely scoff at the idea of Christianity. Like, oh my gosh, if anybody has ever watched anything by like Lawrence Krauss by talk about Christianity, I mean, it is the most like vitriolic, hateful stuff. And there's a lot of physicists like that, but there are still these physicists that they want to connect. It's a human thing to want to connect to something higher than ourselves because we are made by God. We're supposed to have that drive, just like a child has a drive to want to know his mother and father. It's the same thing with us and God, except that some people, they just really don't like God. So they want to try to replace God with some of these other things. And a lot of physicists do that with these extra dimensional intelligences. Now they can wrap it in any kind of scientific veneer they want, but really what they're doing is they're petitioning and venerating ancient false gods, demons, fallen angels, whether they know it or not. And so yeah, while they might think that they're just doing something scientifically, really in their heart, and I think if they were really honest with themselves, they would say, we are really trying to connect with something higher. I mean, it's the same reason why people get really, really obsessed with like ancient alien stuff. We all have this drive that we want to connect to something higher than ourselves. God put that in us. And it's because we all just intuitively know there's something more. There's something broken here. You know, we're supposed to connect with something higher than ourselves. Just what is it? And it's God, it's the Bible, and everything in the Bible explains why we have that. You know, the fall of man, sin, all of that stuff, death. It explains all of it. But the issue is a lot of people don't want to accept that because it means they have to change their lives. They have to do something. They have to be accountable. You know, aliens don't care how you live your life. Aliens don't care what kind of sin you're involved in. You know, extra dimensional intelligences don't care if you want to, you know, do this or that God says is wrong. So there's no accountability with these other things. We know ultimately there will be because there's a final judgment, but to them, where they're at right now, there's no accountability to these. So why would they pick God when God is going to hold them accountable for their actions? And really it's because they just, that's their rejection of God. They would rather be the authors of their own lives, of their own destiny, of their own fate, and go seek out these other things. And I do think it's possible that might actually happen one day, and that might be what Revelation 9 is all about. You know, I've written about this, and I talked about it in my presentation. You know, what if there does come a day where they do get this communication system up and running, and what if that's the time where God's like, all right, you want these false gods, you
have it your way,
gods. Have it your way. Open the bottomless pit. Let's see how they treat you. I mean, it's a similar thing to the Tower of Babel.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Genesis gets into a lot of detail about it, obviously, and then there's some stuff from the book of Jasher that can kind of help explain it, and that's an extra biblical book. It's not in the Bible. Jasher is mentioned in the Bible, but we don't know for 100% sure if the Jasher we have now is the same as the Jasher that's mentioned in the Bible. But regardless, it does go into a little bit more detail about the Tower of Babel incident, and it doesn't conflict with the story at all. So to me, it's like it could be true. It makes sense. But it seems like what the problem was, it wasn't that the tower was so high and it made God mad. It wasn't the height of the tower. It was some type of, it was what they were actually planning on doing. So Jasher says that they wanted to enter heaven, they wanted to kill God, and they wanted to set up idols of their false gods, because apparently Nimrod had gotten everybody all crazy and paranoid, saying that God was going to send another flood. So they had to petition their old gods, you know, the old pre-flood gods, to protect them from that, which is like totally insane. So that was kind of the idea. And, you know, if that is the case, it seems like it's like a repeat of that. So in the Tower of Babel, God eventually had enough, and he said, okay, you're all crazy because you're all grouped together, like all these people in one spot. I told you to spread out for a reason. I think this is why like big cities are usually insane, but like if you're more rural, you know, kind of small towns, they're pretty sane people.
Come on, preach, Josh. Get on and preach.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't think we as people are really meant to be all put together in this like small space with all of it. Like, but that's what happened at the Tower of Babel, and it totally turned them insane. And we see that today in like big cities like New York or LA. I mean, people are like insane. And so it's similar to how like God had enough at one point. He's like, okay, we're going to put an end to this. And part of that too, Deuteronomy speaks a little bit about this, but part of that too was it wasn't just that God scattered the nations and changed their languages, but it was also that he's like, I'm gonna put these false gods, these things that you keep going after, I'm gonna put them in charge of your nations, and let's see how they treat you. That's why we have all these false religions today.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Josh. Yes, I agree. I totally agree. Absolutely. That's great.